Hi everyone, and welcome to this short video on upping your virtual game. The goal here is to help you be as professional as possible in a virtual setting so that you can absolutely kill it at your next virtual event, meeting, or video. We're in an environment now where many people are working from home, and our ability to look professional, even in a home setting, is important not just to our reputation but to our business. So in this video, I'm going to guide you through some things to consider whenever you're participating in an online event where you're on camera. We'll spend the majority of the time going over some basic things about what to wear, how to act, and how to properly set up your environment for a successful video experience. And towards the end, I'll cover some other thoughts about equipment and other topics, but for the moment, let's dive right in. So if there's one thing I'd like everyone to take away from this series, it's learning how to properly converse with the camera. So let's talk for a moment about eye contact. We all know that a good conversation between two people involves eye contact. Eye contact is how you know that I'm engaged, and it's also how I keep you engaged. So it's very important to remember that the majority of the time that you're on camera, you need to be looking at the camera, or at least in the general direction of the camera. I've seen a lot of virtual events, not just in our own company, but worldwide, where people hardly ever look at the camera, either during a conversation or when delivering content. So let me show you what this looks like to the audience. I'm going to read some notes off screen, and you'll quickly notice a difference in how you feel about my engagement and how that affects your engagement. Welcome everyone to our virtual event. We have a great lineup of professional speakers for you, including some of the real heavyweights from our industry. The past 6 months have been a challenge, but these speakers have been able to incubate compelling niches so that we all can harness revolutionary experiences to transform end-to-end synergies and grow value-added paradigms. So I'll be honest, that was difficult for me. I've trained myself to look at the camera, so it took 6 takes for me to be able to do that without stealing a glance and trying to maintain that eye contact. But you can see the clear difference between the conversation you and I are having now versus the dictation I was doing before. Now you can help yourself immensely in this regard by doing 2 little things. Number 1, position your camera directly in your line of sight, as close to eye level as possible. This will usually be often on top of your monitor, so make sure it's right there where you can see it and it's right in front of you. Secondly, place your notes right below the camera. That way you can sneak glances at your notes while still looking in the general direction of the camera. In fact, I've been doing that throughout this whole video, and I will continue to do it through the video. You'll be able to see me glance at my notes on occasion if you look closely, but it won't be nearly as obvious, and I'll go right back to looking at the camera and maintaining that eye contact. So let's talk a bit about how being on camera is different, or actually not different, from being in person. The fact of the matter is that any considerations you make when attending or presenting at a live event in person should also be considerations you make when on video. Just because you're sitting in your home office does not mean you can slack off with regards to your behavior or your image. If it's a virtual meeting, dress and present yourself just like it were a physical meeting. If you're presenting at a virtual event and you would normally dress up if it were a physical event, then dress up for the virtual event as well. In fact, you can't see it, but just over there off camera in my office is a blue dress shirt and a sport coat. I sometimes throw those on for an important call, video call, or before going on video for an event. It is never a detriment to be the best dressed person in the room, even if it's a virtual room. It's always a detriment to be the worst dressed, least professional looking person. So we've talked about how to behave, how to dress, where to put your camera, and how to position your notes. The last basic tip I want to talk about is your environment, and we'll start with lighting. So the one basic thing you should never do is have a wall of windows or other bright light source behind you. Most cameras cannot properly capture big differences with bright light and shadow. So what will happen is if you have bright lights behind you, they're going to force a ton of light into that camera. And that camera is going to close up its aperture and your face is going to look really, really dark. So far in this video, I've been using natural light. On the wall in front of me are two windows on either side. You'll see that they light my face pretty well. They light the room behind me pretty well. But you'll also see some reflections of the outside in the pictures behind me, which maybe aren't ideal, but aren't terrible. They're not terribly distracting. But in general, having light in front of you is the situation you want to put yourself in. So if you can put lights in front of you or windows in front of you, that's the best way for it to be. Later on in the advanced section, we'll talk about stage lighting where you can control the light within your environment. But in general, you just want to make sure that the light is coming from in front of you so that your face is lit properly. You know, we should also talk about the background of your video. Not everyone is as lucky as I am. I have this wonderful office/man cave to retreat to for video calls or presentations, but choosing where you do take that call or give that presentation is important. You want a place that's quiet, and you want a background that's static. So that means no dogs or kids running through that can distract from the most important thing in the video, which is you. In a real pinch, you can use some thumbtacks in the ceiling with a bed sheet to make a sort of fabric backdrop. But in any case, the important thing is that the environment is quiet, private, and ideally clutter-free. And remember, you only have to worry about what the camera sees. What you don't see right now is that my office is a pit. But crucially, that mess is not in view of the camera. So whenever possible, choose your backdrop carefully, and when in a pinch, improvise. Just make sure it's someplace quiet and private so you won't be disturbed when you're giving that awesome virtual presentation. So let's just review the basics. Number one, your conversation is with the camera. Remind yourself over and over to look directly into it as much as possible. And if you need notes, put them directly below the camera so that you can sneak glances at them and then return your eyesight directly back to the camera, giving your audience that eye connection that is so vitally important for their engagement. Number two, just because the meeting or event is virtual doesn't mean you're off the hook as far as presenting yourself well. Behave just like you would during a real physical in-person event and dress up, not down. And finally, consider your environment. Where's the light coming from? Is it quiet and private? What does my background look like? If we do all of these three things, our virtual presence at Siemens will be leagues better than almost everything you'll see online. And your audience will be much more engaged and likely to respond positively, not only to what you're saying, but also to the information that you're relaying to them. So now that we've covered the basics, let's just spend a little time on some advanced considerations for online meetings, events, or videos. As we discussed earlier, we talked about lighting, and you'll notice that things look a little different in my office now. It's now evening, so the wonderful natural light that I had, that I was relying upon earlier, is gone. So now I have to rely upon artificial light. So in my office now, I have two lights with diffuser parasols illuminating the background, and one light over on the side with variable temperature illuminating my face, along with the natural light that my monitor puts out. Now, you don't need a studio light setup like I have. You can just use the lights that you have at your disposal. You can take a table lamp, for example, set it on the floor, remove the shade, and have that light up your background. You can also position a floor lamp to the side in front of you to illuminate your face. The goal is to fill the space with light, but just to brighten it enough so that the camera doesn't have the bright lights and dark shadows that we talked about that are difficult for cameras to deal with earlier. If you want to get a little fancy, you may wish to consider the temperature of the light you use. What's normally called daylight is the range you normally want to stick with for camera work. This is a diagram that shows you the various different light temperatures. And then this diagram here is going to show you how I personally have the lights set up in the office here, but experiment with the equipment you have and see what looks best on the camera you're using, especially if you're going to do a recorded video or video work at night where maybe you're giving a presentation in a different time zone somewhere across the world, because as we know, we're virtual now. These things happen. So I also want to spend a little bit of time talking about cameras, microphones, and headsets. What I'm recording on now, the video, is a standard HD webcam, nothing fancy. There's no professional camera, nothing extraordinary or high cost here. It's just a Logitech webcam HD that I bought probably something like 5 years ago. At this point, hopefully, you already have a good USB HD camera that's capable of video, but if not, look for one that definitely does HD, and if you can afford one, get one with a good microphone, maybe a stereo microphone, and that's just in case you have to end up using that microphone for whatever event or conference or roundtable that you're in as a backup. You may also want to consider a headset. I have this small Jabra Bluetooth headset that I use a lot for online meetings or roundtables where I have to talk as well as listen. A nice wireless Bluetooth headset should work with Zoom, Skype, Circuit, and Teams perfectly, just fine. Almost all of our laptops and systems now come with Bluetooth integrated. If you're recording video like I am here, doing something pre-recorded, then you still probably get away with that headset. They're unobtrusive. They're small. They're not easy. They're not taking the attention away from you like a big bulky headset would be. But you can go crazy with microphones for video recording as well. What I'm using right now is this big, where's it at? Big boom microphone with a pop filter and all that jazz. It's a condenser microphone. It's a USB driven. You're going to get sound from something like this that's worlds better than either the mic on the camera or the mic in that little headset. But the fact of the matter is, these are not great for chat rooms, meetings, or roundtables. They're basically really good for recorded video because if you're in a chat room, you need to hear as well. I don't have anything in my ears right now, so that's where those little Bluetooth headsets really come in handy. So depending on your situation, depending on what you're planning, depending on your budget, there are tons of options out there. Read some reviews, look for a good camera, look for a good probably wireless headset, and you should be really set for whatever it is you need to do. So it's worth talking just a bit more about wardrobe as well. I mentioned earlier about dressing up as opposed to dressing down, but there are a few details that are worth considering here. Number one, in general, I favor lighter fabrics for video. You'll see that I'm a rebel and I'm not conforming to my own guideline here, but the dress shirts that I wear for professional events are light blue. The reason that lighter colors work better is that you can get more contrast in the ripples and the movement of a lighter fabric on camera. They just look a bit more natural. On occasion, really dark fabrics can sometimes come across as kind of a big black blob and don't quite look right. So whenever possible, go for a medium to lighter colored fabric. Also, it's best to stay away from stripes and very small repetitive patterns or checks. This is because video is made out of pixels, and when you try to represent a very thin stripe or a really small pattern using pixels, you sometimes get what's called a moire pattern. And this is where the stripes or patterns will look kind of jaggy or weird, or even create sometimes false colors in the video. So it's best to avoid this altogether by going for solid colors whenever possible. So finally, let's talk a little bit about sitting versus standing. Again, here, I feel like it's always best to follow what you would do in a real in-person similar situation. So if you are delivering a presentation that would normally be on a big stage with a podium and all that jazz going on, you should probably consider standing. Standing gives your words a gravitas that sitting just somehow doesn't convey. So if you're giving a keynote presentation, even if it's a virtual online event, I would consider standing. I think that's worth the extra effort to make that happen. That might mean you need a tripod for your camera or some other situation, but I think it's probably worth the effort, because somehow standing means business. It means you know what you're talking about. It means you are an expert. So consider that if that's what you would normally be doing in an in-person similar situation. However, if you're in a virtual meeting where the physical meeting would be in a meeting room and everybody's sitting around a big table, then sitting's probably just fine. However, one caution I will give you about presenting either a presentation or maybe as part of a round table when you're sitting, if you can, use a stationary chair. So again, I've trained myself to remain fairly still when I'm on camera, but I've seen a lot of people who lean way back while they're presenting. I've seen a lot of people who fidget back and forth in their chairs while they're presenting. And the problem is, again, all of this extra movement, it takes the focus away from you, your face, your eye contact with the audience, and the message you're trying to deliver. So if you're going to sit, either force yourself to sit still or use a chair or a stool or something else that's stationary. So that's pretty much it. None of these things is all that complicated. Smile, dress up, be professional. Remember to have good eye contact with the camera so that you're engaged with your audience. Just a little forethought about what virtual situation you're going into and how you can make that experience a little better for your audience will go a really long way. So I hope this has been insightful. I hope it's given you a few tips that you can use to take to your next virtual event. And I look forward to seeing the presentations you give, the roundtables you participate in, and the videos you create. I really think that this moment in time is a permanent shift towards virtual events and virtual meetings, and just a little bit of knowledge about how best to approach those situations can make the impression that our customers, our partners, and the rest of the world get of Siemens that much better. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and I really wish you good health.
Siemens, ingenuity for life.